Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. I didn't know you could say that many nice things about us.
I need to silence my cell phone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Winchester Academy for having us speak here today. Just looking at the list of individuals who have spoken here over the last several months and years, it's a humbling experience to have to be up here, knowing you've got doctors and professors and things like that. So it's a good experience, and I really appreciate it. The community here in Waupaca is very lucky to have something like the Winchester Academy. So thank you for that. I am also a 2000 graduate of Waupaca High School as well. So it's nice to be able to come back home again and see some familiar faces and familiar sights, and eating at Simpson's was a cool experience. Hadn't done that in a while either. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay. We'll get moving here in just a second. Just wanted to start out with a quick disclaimer. This presentation is it's meant to be a pretty broad overview of the profession of law enforcement, and then having multiple perspectives, both Brian and I working at different agencies. We'll do our best to answer specific questions at the end. We're going to go over just a few specific examples of some things that we've worked on. Our opinions are just that, right? It's our opinions, is not necessarily indicative of the profession as a whole. So just wanted to make sure that we put that out there. I can definitely do that, sir. Yes. Thank you for speaking up. So I know from firsthand experience being a cop that when cops attend trainings and in-services and things like that, we don't like to participate in questions and answers and group participations and that kind of thing. So for some of my presentations, I usually don't include asking the audience questions, except for this one time. I'm going to ask you all a question, and if you wouldn't mind raising your hand and shouting out a few things. All I'm looking for is, what, in your opinion, are police expected to do, or what do you think police officers do at just a general base police officer level? Keep safe, keep the peace, keep us safe.
Enforce the law.
Enforce the law? Yeah. What else?
Investigate crimes.
What kind of crimes?
Any kind of crime.
Yes.
From petty theft to breaking and entering.
Petty theft to breaking, entering, to murder. Yeah.
How about drugs?
Drugs. Yes. Drug investigations. That's a big problem now, isn't it? Not just here.
What's the majority of the money spent in
For what?
drugs enforcement?
Drug enforcement? That would be a question for Chief, but yeah.
So we belong to the Central Wisconsin Drug Task Force, and what that entails, I believe there's 13 counties that is involved with that. Is it going here? So we have 13 counties, and what's kind of neat about that is her son, Denny, used to be the chief of police for the city of Berlin. When I got promoted in 2002 working in the drug unit, one of the places that I went and worked was in the city of Berlin. So in order for us to be able to last in small communities like we do with the drug problems that we have, one of the things that we rely on are grants. So there's something that's called the Burn Grant. And when I got involved in 2002, we were getting about $300,000 for our drug task force to investigate drug offenses or crimes that were related to drug offenses. And all this was overtime money that we would use. The drug work back then was a lot different. We worked in the bars. As the drugs changed as to what they are now, we very seldom do bar work anymore. All the stuff is happening is during the daytime. You know, it's not the weekend recreation with the cocaine and the marijuana. It's now with the fentanyl and the heroin and the meth. This is happening all day long. Our grants have been reduced for our task force to about $100,000. So for all our counties that we have, That's the budget that we get. So we rely upon changing our schedules for that, to allow the officers to come in when they're working. Like our drug officer that we have right now, he makes up his own hours. So he comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning, he might work for 2 hours, and then he goes home. But all that is done, he's expected to work like 80 hours in a pay period. So however he makes that 80 hours up, that's what he gets. But the money is really limited as to what we have. So it went from like 300,000 back in the early 2000s to just under 100,000 for our task force. And I know for Madison, that's obviously a lot different.
Yeah, any town, any city is going to have their own unique drug problem, different drugs. The population of people, Madison is certainly no different, and that can be as simple as you see somebody using drugs to I see somebody selling drugs to so-and-so overdosed in the bathroom, and each one of those types of calls are going to get different responses from the officers depending on where you are. You could also get those large level dealer, we know who's dealing, we want to get the one higher than that. That's when it goes on to like a detective or more of a specialty type unit. Yeah, so drugs definitely a part of what police do every day. You all mentioned some good examples as well. The clicker's not working yet, but we'd be on the third slide. I don't know if you can space bar it over. But I kind of wrote up a list of just a few examples of types of calls that officers are going to go on a daily basis. Definitely not an all-encompassing list by any means, but traffic stops, big one, right? Domestic disturbances, regular disturbances, juvenile complaints, check welfare, mental health related calls, a big part of what we do. First aid type calls, harassments, somebody said murders, right? Not just murders, but just death investigations in general. We're responding to those unless it's in a hospital, at least as far as Madison is concerned. We're still responding to those death investigations. We have to essentially rule out what's happening. Like my dad said, prior to joining Madison Police, I had no prior law enforcement experience before that. And so when I was in the academy in 2012, I was honestly struck at the different types of calls that we're supposed to go on. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to remember what to do if this happens versus if this happens? Because essentially, officers are responsible for doing that, but each one of those types of calls and cases are going to have their own kind of unique response to it from a patrol officer. You're going to be asking different questions in a domestic disturbance versus, in like a fatality traffic crash or something similar to that. So it was daunting at first, but like in life and any job, the more experience you get, the more repetition you get, the easier that these calls become. And I mean, it's when you sit back and really think about it, like these what officers are expected to do, we're often having contact with folks, maybe not necessarily on their worst day ever, but on a pretty bad day. If you don't know what to do in a particular situation, if you're confronted with something that you don't normally think about, like you stumble across a missing kid in the middle of the road, or like you are in an argument, or you're, heaven forbid, a loved one dies, you don't think about those very often. What is your typical thought process? What is your response? Well, let's call the police. They'll know what to do. And when we are expected to know what to do, and the vast majority of the time I'd say we do know what to do, and if we don't, then somebody else on scene or a supervisor can get called, and we're doing that. So we're switching gears constantly. You go from one call to the next call, and you're just not quite sure what it's going to be. But made it through patrol, and it was a incredible experience.
And one of the things that's different from our community is Andy and I were talking earlier. I said our officers have actually delivered a baby. We have driven the ambulance to the hospital. That's something that they've never had the opportunity to do. Myself being on the fire department also, driven the ambulance many times, the fire trucks. We know where the equipment is for the ambulance crew to get all that stuff out. And a lot of things that have changed for us and is really changing right now for law enforcement is just the cyber crimes that we have to investigate and the lack of resources that we have. And we rely upon, the bigger agencies have more technology than what we have. And I think the biggest thing, we look at both of our departments, the sizes. We don't have anything different than the city of Madison doesn't have. We just don't have the volume of the calls that they have and, the expertise in the certain divisions that they have within the police department. I think that's probably one of the biggest differences with our departments.
Yeah, you mentioned driving an ambulance too, and talking with Nolan before the presentation. The job that paramedics do is paramount, and we work very closely with them on a lot of our calls, and it's not an easy job. They should be right along with us when it comes to recognizing and appreciating what paramedics do as well. Unfortunately, we can't see it, but I had thrown up a slide of a picture of a peregrine falcon talking about the weird calls that we get. Right when I was in patrol, we had a call come in of an injured or a falcon that was hobbling around the parking lot of the Madison Gas and Electric substation downtown Madison. Couldn't fly, didn't look good. Of course, no animal control officers on duty. So what do? You call the police, right? Because they can figure it out. And so that's what we had to do. It ended up getting a raincoat from the trunk of my squad car. Oh, there's Sparky. Putting the raincoat on top of Sparky and basically just lifting it and carrying it to the back of my squad car. And that's sitting in the back seat of my squad car right there. So ended up taking it to the Humane Society. I'm told he made a full recovery and was a little bit dehydrated and came back out. So good story there. But one of those things the last thing you expect as a patrol officer to go and do, right? You think you've got one too.
Yep.
Will?
And next one, if you saw on there was a picture of a fawn. Their mother got hit by a car. And the fawn was left abandoned in somebody's yard. So, again, what does everybody do? They call police department. We're like, well, what are we going to do with this? So we actually got the fawn in a carrier, and we brought it back to the police department. And then we got a hold of somebody in Green Bay from the rescue up there, and they actually came down. And what was kind of neat was, at that time, both of my children had just stopped down to work, and actually one of them's in the crowd here. And they said, this fawn's going to need water, it's going to need this, it's going to need that. So how many opportunities are you ever going to have to feed an animal like that? So it was kind of neat to watch them give the fawn some water and, try to keep it calm and everything else. So you don't get to experience all that stuff very much. And that was the first time in 30 years. Yeah, you're just a cute little guy. But in 31 years that I've been here, that was the first time that we had to deal with something like that. So it was a pretty cool experience. And then I got to enjoy it with my kids on top of it.
Switching gears a little bit, talking about an overview, just like I said, a general idea of how has law enforcement changed over the years. I mean, we've got the obvious ones, cars. Right now, when I came on in 2012, we were driving all Crown Victorias. Now it's switching over to all Explorers. I think that's what all you guys have.
We have Explorers and Tahoes.
And Tahoe. Oh, Tahoe's nice. Okay. So those are some of the obvious ones. Technology has been huge, changed more so in Chief's career, since he's been around a little bit longer than I have. But even I'd say in the last 12 years that I've been in, I've noticed quite a few changes. We're talking about records. Everything is digitized, right? In police now, or a lot of things are. From the forms that we give people, or the forms that we're filling out to complete some of the reports, like OWI stuff, to our search warrants now. And that was more of a 2020 change due to the pandemic. But prior to 2020, as a detective, if I wanted to complete a search warrant, I would have to write everything up, print out a copy, walk over to the courthouse, have it signed off by a district attorney, by the judge, bring it back, and then we serve the warrant. Since 2020, everything is now digitized, right? So all I need to do is sign it, get it notarized, scan it in, and email it up to the judge. Takes an hour or two, and then they email it right back. Prior to that, we were having to sometimes go to the judge's house in the middle of the night to have them physically sign this warrant. So I think that's a good change that's happened. But it's a good example of we're just kind of getting up with the times now. All of our records
are in their own law enforcement record system. Most of the time, it works great, but it's a much easier way than filing through filing cabinets trying to find something. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that, Chief.
Yeah, when I first started, we actually had one computer in our police department. We were still using typewriters back in 1994, and we had to handwrite everything. And like Andy talked about, if we needed something from a judge, we had to go knock on their door and wake them up in the middle of the night in order to do that. And over the years, obviously the technology has changed so much. Each of our officers share a computer. They got computers in their squad cars. We used to be able to handwrite tickets, and I could handwrite a ticket and be done with it in about 4 minutes. It takes me about 15 or 20 minutes to use the squad computer, because I don't do it enough. I don't write very many tickets. But yeah, the technology has really changed in regards to just the everyday stuff that we're doing. And I don't know, do you want to talk about a little bit about AI now, or you want to talk about it with the gear? So I actually, I attend, if you heard earlier, the International Chiefs Conference, and I got involved with that about 2018, 2019. I wasn't sure how important it would be for somebody from a smaller community going to a large event like this. How beneficial would it be to the city of Waupaca? Well, there's classes that you get to go to that you have the experts from all around the world that are giving these classes. When I first started, we talked about body cameras. They were just coming out. And what you actually see on TV with a body camera and what actually happens sometimes is not entirely what you saw, because there's so many frames per second that there is that's filming that stuff gets missed, or there's a misconception of that. Recently, I just got back from Boston. The year before that was in San Diego. They just started talking about AI. And I'm in a room with probably 300-400 chiefs from all the way around the world. They asked, how many in here are using AI in law enforcement? 2 hands went up. Well, 2 weeks ago when I was in Boston, they asked that same question. Over half the hands went up in the air in regards to using AI and how important AI is. One of the things that we're actually looking at for the city of Waupaca, it's through a company called Axon. Now, a lot of you may not know who Axon is, but if you watch police shows and you see those 3 yellow dots up in the corner when somebody has a body camera on, that's the company Axon. They're probably the best company in the world for technology and everything. They have something out now that on your body camera, you can go and have a conversation with somebody in 6-7 minutes, and you can ask different things, and you can talk about other things, and you can come back. That body camera, once it's downloaded and it goes into the AI will actually type a report for you, and it'll take out all the BS that's inside between that has nothing to do with the complaint. So it's like somebody watched it and they wrote a report based on what you were investigating. That 6-7 minute field interview that the officer did, that report was done in 45 seconds. So if you can imagine in law enforcement, and Andy will tell you this, the biggest thing that we hate is paperwork. And we probably do paperwork 50 to 60% of our job is paperwork. So imagine if you could use that technology and you could take the report writing away where all they have to do is proofread the reports. So that's something that's really going to change with law enforcement in years to come, is the AI. I know you guys have drones. We went to a place that had drones. They actually have tasers on the drones now that they're going to be able to start. They're going to be able to fly a drone into this room. Somebody that's acting up in here, they could fly it in here and they could hit a button and it's going to shoot the probes out and they're going to disable the person. They're going to be able to drop flashbangs. They can go and they can go through windows. They can crack the windows and fly a drone through a window. So that's where technology is really going with, the new tasers, the LPRs with the license plate readers that we can drive, and they scan every license plate that goes by. If that person is wanted or is in any sort of trouble, that tells us automatically on a computer.
Yeah, and ironically enough, Madison is definitely a bigger department than Wapaka. We are just now starting a pilot program for body-worn cameras for our officers. How long have you had body-worn cameras, Chief?
Well, since maybe 2014, does that sound about right, Jim? Probably.
There in 16, yes, by 16.
Yeah, we had, before 2016, we had them. And the first product that we had was complete garbage. You could have taken that body camera and it would have been more useful throwing it at somebody because it was so bad. It didn't record everything. It was at nighttime. It was like walking into a pitch black room. That's all you saw. So the technology has evolved so much that we go in now.
That didn't have decent audio either.
Yeah, it didn't have decent audio either. So, for us small, Wapaka, we're able to get on top of the technology at the very beginning where you would think that the city of Madison would have had that stuff a long time ago.
Yeah, a combination of a lot of people in one room trying to figure things out, right? The woman in the front row said, is it because of money? And essentially that's what it boiled down to, is why Madison didn't have the cameras. You ask, I would say, the majority of officers, and they will tell you that they are for body-worn cameras, right? It does a lot of things. It I would say vindicates officers more than the other way around, right? But yeah, so finally, hopefully Madison will be getting them soon. And I know there's definitely an issue with storing all that data, right? That you get from the body-worn cameras. That's also a big deal. But a couple of good examples of how the tech has changed and is going to continue to change as we move along here. AI is continuing to play a much bigger part. Chief kind of touched on the gear a little bit too. The tasers. We've got a lot more. Excuse me. Non-lethal or less than lethal options for weapons than we used to, right? Obviously, we've got the taser, we've got the spray, the pepper spray, we've got 40 millimeter launchers. I don't know if you all are familiar with those. Beanbag shotgun, it's kind of that similar concept, but the 40 millimeter launches a round about this long, and it's just a big foam round. And you're able to, the benefit of that is that you're able to stand further away from a person than like a taser or spray. We've used it a lot for suicidal subjects who are actively hurting themselves, or somebody, if there's almost like a hostage type situation, you can have an officer 30, 40 yards away and deliver a round to that person's midsection or legs. And that hurts bad enough to temporarily incapacitate so that officers can get in there and then detain the person.
Did you want to hit on the VR? Have you ever done that?
No.
The VR?
Yeah.
So, you watch all these old movies when we were younger, you're like, how is our world ever going to get there? You think that none of this stuff is going to be a reality, and I always look at that movie like Back to the Future. Who would ever thought we'd had TVs on the wall and we could host meetings and that through them and do all this silly stuff? But I just did the VR training with Axon where they put you in a booth and they put goggles on you, and it's like you're on a traffic stop and you have your taser and you have to give commands, and the person starts yelling back at you, and you have to make a decision of how you're going to handle that situation. So it's really good training for the officers for their first, it's not their, so I guess my point is, it's not their first time using the taser when they go and they approach somebody. We can do scenarios with them, and they can run through these scenarios 25, 50, 75 times, and they try to get as many different scenarios as they can, so when they go up there, they can kind of know what to expect and how to handle themselves. But this is all new training that's coming up, and it's really changing law enforcement.
So these are some more general concepts of the evolution of law enforcement. Next slide, we're just going to touch on some more recent changes, since everything that went down in 2020. We had really a trifecta of you know what storm, right? We had the global pandemic, which upended everything. I had never experienced anything like that. I'm sure most of you in the room have never experienced anything like that before. A complete shutdown of everything, right? I can still remember going to Costco right when this first started, and the line, seeing the line of people. Each one of them has, of course, a package of toilet paper in their cart because there's no more toilet paper anywhere. I don't know if that was the same here, but I couldn't believe it. And then you get home and, okay, do we got to disinfect the groceries before we take them out of the pack? All sorts of stuff. It was just crazy. And then that, then that transit that lasted obviously for a while and it's still going on today. So I don't want to minimize it. But what you had then is the George Floyd incident in May of 2020, which, worldwide protests, right? Again, something that I hadn't experienced before. And then we had the presidential election of 2022. So as well, I should say. And so we've really had a lot going on in 2020. And I think we can kind of each speak a little bit to what we experienced in 2020.
Yeah, I believe most of you in this room remember the protests that we had in our downtown area during that time frame. Why they picked Wapaka, we still have no idea why it happened. It started out with some people that just wanted to have a conversation. You know, you want to be transparent, you want to talk to them, and then it ended up developing into these large protests. We were the first city in the state that had armed protesters. After everything that happened, we were the first ones that had them. And one of the things that I can say is we're very lucky to live in the community that we live in here. It wasn't our citizens, our community, that were the ones that were coming in. It was people from the outside that came to our community. We were getting threats on social media. We were getting threats through the mail from people in different states that they wanted to burn this community down. So when we did have our large protest here, I forget, we had probably, I think, at one time in the mid-30s for squad cars that we had in our community because we wanted to make sure that everybody in our community was safe. And the good thing that we had with our community is our community supported us. We had problems. They went up to our officers. They said, "You don't have a taser. Does that mean you're going to shoot me?" Our city council, the community here, we went out and we got everybody a taser. After that happened, every member of our department was issued a taser. They didn't check them in. They didn't check them out. We had radio problems. What were we able to do? The community again. We were able to pick up and we were able to get brand new radios to replace the ones that were so old. We used the technology. We had the drones. We had an inner perimeter. We had an outer perimeter. And it was as frustrating as it was for law enforcement. We were very lucky to have the community we had. One of the problems for us, though, is because it got so bad of people getting up into their face, yelling and screaming at them, we actually had an officer that quit because of the stress and everything that he went through. And he took a break from law enforcement. So, it affects us mentally, and that'll never change. But again, the city of Wapaka and the surrounding area here was just very supportive of us during those hard times when law enforcement really took a hit. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and similar experience in Madison too. We had detectives are supposed to work 3 or 4 weekend days per year in Madison for MPD, and so it's not a lot. It's nice. May 29th of 2020 happened to be my first weekend coverage day. It was a Saturday. That was the first weekend day I had to work of the year, and it also happened to be the day where it really went bad in Madison. And it started out. We knew there was going to be a large-scale protest, which happened without incident, basically around the entire city-county building where the police district department is. A small group of folks shot off from that larger group, started engaging in disruptive behavior, breaking windows, damaging property, that kind of thing. My squad car actually got They busted out the windshield of my squad car. It was almost totaled. I couldn't believe it wasn't. Later on in the night, we had a MPD squad set on fire, rolling down the street. I never thought I would see anything like that. In the academy, they tell you in certain scenarios, when you're conducting scenarios in the academy, you're supposed to be the baby police officer, right? And so they say, okay, and action. And as the baby police officer, you're supposed to ask for backup. And the training sergeant says, we don't have any backup. And they're supposed to ask for this. We don't have any of that. We're supposed to ask for that. And then the training officer says, just pretend the city is burning. The city's on fire, right? That was always a fictional scenario in my mind. And that actually happened on May 29th of 2020, where it was not just downtown, it was widespread. The malls were getting looted and rioted. Getting goosebumps just talking about it, because it's nothing that I'd ever seen before. And so I was essentially inside. I was tasked with basically holding the building and making sure folks didn't come in and break into the building. Fortunately, they didn't. But as the night wore on, I'm listening to the radio, hearing things like officer down, which I had never heard before that day either. Fortunately, it was, unfortunately, there wasn't any significant injuries for officers. They were getting hit with bottles and rocks and things like that. But I had kind of had enough towards the end of the night, and I wanted to get out there, right? So I got my riot gear that I had on and got a ride downtown down to State Street and relieved an officer who had been there all day and essentially stood on the front line, and we were responsible for pushing the group down State Street because they were continuing to break into buildings and steal things and damage property. And so we pushed the line all the way down until the bottom of State Street. We had, I believe it was Columbia County Sheriff's Department were at the bottom of State Street. And so we had jurisdictions driving in emergency mode to Madison to help out. So an incredibly unfortunate incident, one that I'll never forget, and hope not to experience again anytime soon. That day and that summer did a lot of things. One of the things that one of the consequences or one of the effects that it had that maybe is not so negative, and Chief kind of alluded to it already too, is shaking up of the status quo and how departments are doing things. I'm not a fan of resting on my laurels. I think we need to be constantly reevaluating who we are and what we're doing, not just at work, but in personal life as well. Continuous improvement, that's a core value that the City of Madison Police Department has that I adhere to. And so I don't want us to say, well, that's the way we've always done it, so we're going to continue to do that. Buying tasers for everybody, right? New radios, shaking up the status quo. What Madison did was in response to those large-scale protests, before 2020, it was, well, you have a large number of people. Guess what? City of Madison has a large number of people. We're going to meet you out in the field of battle, like, it's a classic Civil War type scenario, right? What we found out was that it agitated things. It escalated things, right? Whether or not it's our fault, that's what happened. And so what we are doing now is, if we have a large-scale protest, we are using ground resources. We're using cameras, and we're identifying those specific bad actors, those agitators within the large group, because it's not the whole group. It's those single bad actors or two or three of them, and we're getting a small contact team. We're getting in quick. We're grabbing those folks, and we're pulling them out, and then we're getting the heck out of there, right? So that's a good example, I think, of how we're doing things just a little bit differently. There's a ton of examples that we could sit here and talk about. That's just kind of one that had come to mind. One of the more negative consequences that we saw in Madison, in addition to, obviously, you have the community reactions of the protests. Like I said, global. Whoops, clock fell. Everybody okay? It's time. Does that mean we have to hurry along? If that's not a sign, I don't know.
Gary, you can put the correct time on it now, too.
So we saw, like I said, a lot of the protests happening across the world. In Madison specifically, one of the unfortunate things that happened is our school board decided they voted to take all the school resource officers out of the 4 main high schools that we have in Madison, just as a result of everything that was going on. I don't necessarily need to go into that in detail here tonight. Now, I could certainly talk with you about it after the presentation if you want, but suffice it to say, I'm a big advocate, and our department is, and our chief is a big advocate of having officers in schools for a lot of different reasons. And so to have them taken out and still not put back in is a big step backwards. Perhaps the biggest negative consequence that we had as a result of 2020 is recruitment. Chief mentioned, an officer quit, right? Totally fine. We see that happen a lot, and it's not just those officers who are of retirement age. It's what we're seeing is officers who have 2, 3, 4 years in. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. They're still young. They have a lot of life left ahead of them. They're seeing what's happening in the world, and they're seeing how officers are treated and thinking to themselves, I could make way more money doing a lot safer things, right? And so a lot of officers left. A lot of officers who were close to retirement age left. Unfortunately, as well as we're seeing way less people applying to become police officers in addition to all of those people leaving. So just anecdotally, when I joined the department in 2012, we had something like 1,200 applicants putting in for around 25 spots. So 1,200 applicants, 25 spots. A lot of people, not a lot of spots. Recently, we are seeing 200 applicants putting in for 50 spots. So we're down 1,000 people putting in. That's a big problem. Fortunately, we still have people that we can choose from, but we're not getting that big pool that we can choose the best of the best from. And this is across the board. All the dignitary visits that have been happening in Madison, I've had the fortune of communicating with a lot of the U.S. Secret Service folks. I work part-time with the FBI special agents as well, and they will tell you the exact same thing. People don't want to be special agents. People don't want to work in the Secret Service anymore. It's just across the globe, or across the gamut.
And locally here, when I got into law enforcement in '94, I went to Green Bay and Appleton. 300 applicants for one job. When I came to the city of Waupaca, I think there were 60 or 70 for one job. Right now, if we're lucky to get 10 applicants when we have a job, 10 applicants. Of those 10 applicants, there may be 2 people of those 10 that are qualified to do our job. And I can say we've been very fortunate as of late as to our hires. One of the fortunate things that I'll bring up is he's in the crowd here is Garrett. He's in the back. He decided to get into law enforcement when he was older for some reason. He had a great job, and I don't know, he's kind of got crazy. He said, I want to be a law enforcement officer now. So he entered it at mid-age. We don't have the younger people that want to get in law enforcement because of the stigma and everything that's been said about us on TV. When we lose an officer, just for the city of Waupaca, it costs us probably $25,000 to $35,000 to replace that individual because of the overtime that we have to pay for training. We have to pay a field training officer 1 hour of overtime, and then we lose the lack of work out on the street. So all the citations and arrests we make, unfortunately, we do receive money for those, for restitution or through the courts that we do get that, but it ends up being $25,000, $30,000, $35,000. And then we lose all those years of experience if we do have somebody that's been here a while. So if they're a field training officer, if they're on a SWAT unit, they may be a detective. The other thing that we're losing them to is they don't get out of law enforcement, but they're going to the bigger agencies because they can pay more money than what we can pay locally. We had lost 2 officers that went to the Fox Valley that started out at $8 to $9 more an hour than what they were making here. So with the lateral transfer, so how do you compete with that with the smaller jurisdictions? And I think, was it Madison or there's somebody that was down south that was hiring there, paying about $50 an hour.
Dane County Sheriff
Dane County
took
Sheriff.
a lot of Madison officers too. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so that's what's happening is they want to get the cream of the crop. So they're paying these guys and ladies, they're paying them $50-some an hour to do patrol work, and we don't even make that much money, and we're in leadership positions.
Have you ever thought about growing your own officers? Getting them and putting them
All right, thank you. That's part of our police commission that's here. So because of the recruitment problems that we had, our department had never put anybody through recruit school before. So we started looking at applicants that had no prior law enforcement experience that were getting in from different careers, and they had good values. Everything about them that we found was excellent. They're going to be excellent employees. And Garrett was one of those guys, and we sent the last 3 guys to recruit school. When we did, and we'd never done it in the history of our department. We had one graduate number 1 in his class. Number 3, 4, number 4, and I believe the other one was number 5 or 6. Yeah, so we've had the last 3 people that we've hired. We've sent them to the recruit academy, and they've been in the top 5 or top 6 for their class. So that's the type of quality of applicants that we've gotten for our department. But like I said, there's only 1 or 2 out of each for us, and we've been very fortunate for a community here to get what we have gotten.
So shameless plug for both of us. If you know somebody who is thinking about law enforcement, tell them to put in for it, seriously, because we need good people. We had a 50-year-old guy apply when maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. 50-year-old apply to become a police officer, and he made it. And he did it for a few years, and it did a wonderful job. And then it was time for him to move on to the next thing. So it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. If you have it in your heart, do it. Because we're looking for good ones, and a lot of the more veteran officers or folks that have been around the job for a while will say that these things come in waves, and we're definitely at a dip right now. I don't know if it'll ever get back to what it used to be, but it's going to get better, and I think it already has started to a little bit, to a certain extent. So if you know somebody, tell them to do it. We got about 10, 15 minutes left here. This next slide we won't harp too much on unless you have something you really wanted to get to, Chief, but I wanted to highlight the importance of communication in law enforcement, sharing information so often, and that's on the base level, right? It starts officers communicating with dispatch back and forth, can sometimes mean life and death situations. On a larger scale, if we're talking about information sharing between agencies, sometimes we have individuals who cross jurisdictions that are dangerous, right? So we've got to communicate back and forth with folks. I'm fortunate enough to be in Madison, we're obviously the capital of Wisconsin. So we have a lot of state, a lot of local, and a couple federal agencies that are right in the city of Madison. And so I'm working on a case now. Started as a City of Madison case that I got as my role as a threat assessment detective. We found out a few things about this guy, and it has turned into a federal investigation. And so in my job, I already have a lot of those contacts. I know where I need to go and who I need to talk to. I'm fortunate with that. So the fusion centers on the bottom down there, the Wisconsin Statewide Intelligence Center, WISIC is what we call it. It's a hub for communication for law enforcement agencies. Not a lot of people know about it. I didn't hear about it until I became an officer, but it's a pretty cool setup. I mean, there's one in Madison, there's one in Milwaukee, but there's both commissioned and non-commissioned personnel who work at the fusion center, and they're really specialized in like suspicious activity reports, or people who are engaging in kind of suspicious behavior. They could be a risk for mass violence. They could be a risk for domestic terrorism, whatever, you name it. But if you have somebody like that, which we see frequently, we know where to go with that information, and we know that information is going to get put out to all the right people. And I don't know, Chief, you want to talk about the why can't alerts?
Yeah, the why can't alerts are really good. If we have crimes or anything that happen, we can put out, if we recover a bunch of stuff, we can put an alert out. It takes us probably about 10, 15 minutes. And when we do that, we can do it to either central Wisconsin or the whole state of Wisconsin. If any of those departments have similar crimes or they have property that was stolen and we recover it, they get to see that right away. We were just talking, Andy and I were just talking just before the program. We had something happen in the city of Wapaka here, and the same thing happened in the city of Madison. And we were able to, suspicious activity, and we talked about that. When that stuff happens in our community, we just don't bury it. We share that with the Fusion Center. We share that with other law enforcement officers. People may have not done anything per se illegal, maybe things that we don't like, but we still share that information because we're not sure what those bad actors or the actors may do in the future. That way, if they have that information and we have photographs of those people, if something bad does happen, it's going to pop up in the Fusion Center. They're going to see that. And then you also see like the amber alerts, the silver alerts, the green alerts. There's so many different alerts now. It's a lot easier for us if something bad happens to put that out there. Years ago, there was so many parameters. If we didn't check every box and it didn't meet every piece of the criteria, we weren't allowed to do that. They allow us to do that now more.
Yeah, and you've seen those signs popped up on the highway, right? Look out for such and such license plate, missing, endangered, or whatever it is. Technology is a lot of things, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but we can definitely use it to our advantage if we want to get word out quick on something that's very important. Wanted to just highlight a little bit some of the similarities and differences between more urban departments like Madison and more rural departments like Wapaka. There's obvious ones, right? Like we kind of touched on it earlier. Just the sheer number of people is different. So we're gonna have more calls for service, right? Some of our at Madison, I should say, and some of our calls are going to be a little bit different than Wapaka. Although I will say, for being a mid-sized city, Madison has had its fair share over the years of calls involving various forms of livestock wandering around. Goat herding calls. I was part of a few of those when I was in patrol, and we had a buck running loose downtown 2 weekends ago, just creating all sorts of calls for service all over the place.
Just so you know, that happens every night here.
It does.
It's called the rut right now.
Yes, it is. And I think he got out. He was in one place, and then he was in another place, and then somebody called and said they hit a deer, and then when officers got on scene, the deer wasn't there. So I think he got away finally.
Is that responsibility the person that hits the deer? They're supposed to call him?
I think in Madison, I think anybody who's walking around downtown and sees a deer with big horns they're probably going to call. So we had plenty of people calling in. Yeah. So at Madison too, because we have a larger number of officers, larger number of people means larger number of officers. We're afforded the availability to have specialty response units, and I just listed a few of them up here that I think have had a really big impact on what we do. The mental health unit was created back in 2015, and I was fortunate enough to get hired as one of the first mental health officers that the city had. We had our chief back then, Mike Koval, fantastic human being. He believed in the philosophy of having a mental health unit, so much so that he took out 5 officers off the street, even though we were already short-staffed. And he said, you 5 officers are now going to be mental health officers. And so that unit is still going strong. We've got now 6 mental health officers, 1 for each district in Madison, and they're paired with 2 embedded crisis workers from Journey Mental Health. And so a lot of what they do is not necessarily responding to those crises as they're happening on the street, but it's much more so finding out about these incidents, finding out about individuals who may have frequent contact with the police, working with service providers, working with family members, developing a plan, and then communicating that plan to patrol officers, such as in the event you come across so-and-so, here are some triggers that you can use to get, or not use, I should say. Here are some hooks that you can use to get along with them better. Here's where you can take them if they meet this criteria versus this criteria. And so a lot of it is meant to be more proactive. Where are the holes? What's missing here? Why is this person having the contact in the first place, right? And so we're able to connect a lot of those dots and then prevent a lot of those calls from happening. I spoke with Nolan a little bit about the CARES team. This team is fantastic, and they're fairly new, but it's a paramedic paired up with a crisis worker. And their job is to go out and respond to nonviolent mental health calls in Madison. And their program is growing. They're now expanding to different hours, different days, weekend hours. They're expanding to the Dane County Sheriff's Department. But you hear officers buzzing on the radio all the time, hey, is there a CARES team available? Is there an MHO, a mental health officer available? So that when the CARES team responds, that officer is freed up then to go and respond to other things that may be violent or maybe more emergent than somebody who's maybe not necessarily a danger that second, a danger to themselves or to others. So the AODA services, touched on it earlier, the drug issues, right? The MARI program, Madison Area Recovery Initiative, essentially allows for individuals who get in trouble for using drugs instead of jail time. They're asked to complete a program, and if they complete the program, if they meet a certain criteria, then they will not get charged with that crime. And so it's all about recovery as opposed to punishment. And then the threat assessment team is another kind of specialized response that we use for folks who could be at risk of committing a mass violence attack. And so we're identifying individuals, identifying if they are, at risk, if they have some kind of grievance, have they taken steps to commit an attack, getting with family members, and we're actually doing full-blown like threat assessments on people. It's a newer program and still in the works. We applied for a grant this year, and unfortunately we didn't get it. We were going to hopefully create a full-time threat assessment detective, but we're hopeful that we know how to get that, secure that grant in the future to have that. So that's another topic I think that we're going to see a lot more of, including with AI, how AI is kind of blowing up. I think more departments are going to start prioritizing this idea of threat assessment because we all know what's happening out there. So yeah, community stakeholders. I threw that in here because we couldn't have any of these specialty units without these community stakeholders that we're working with. So just the idea of, yes, we are one piece of the pie. The idea is not to have police be that all-encompassing case manager, right? But instead, we do our job. We do a warm handoff to the stakeholder, the community stakeholder, the agency, with the idea that they can then provide that more long-term help for people. Anything else you wanted to add there?
No, we can go to the next slide. I think it's the last one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so anytime I have a conversation with somebody who, I don't know, maybe doesn't like police or has had a bad experience with law enforcement, I always encourage folks to go on a ride along. There's not many other better ways to really see what officers do every day than to sit in a squad car and see what they do every day, right? Citizen Academies, Madison has this. It's a multiple day affair, 2 or 3 hours a day, something like that, where you can sign up for it. You can go through the classes that our officers go through for their training in the academy. You can see how our officers are getting trained, what they're doing in the training. It's more in depth than a ride along, but it's very intuitive. I included the core team up here. They're our community outreach and resource team. They do a good job. They're out with the kids on the weekends and doing all the fun community events, including Dunk Tank, which I mistakenly volunteered for earlier this summer, and my entire family dunked me multiple times. So there's things like that Madison has. I figured we'd just throw that in here. No, Dad did not dunk me, but everybody else did. Mom. Yeah, so I think you want to talk about the community engagement?
Yeah, we're really fortunate that, being in a smaller department, it's really neat as to the different programs and the different things that we do. And a lot of these programs that our officers have started, it hasn't been anything that management has asked them to do. They come up with some ideas as to how they can engage better with the community. Within the last year or year and a half, we do Coffee with a Cop. I think we've done maybe 2, possibly 3, 2 so far, where the officers go to a local coffee place and we pay for the coffee, and the officers sit and talk with the people in the community, and it's really neat. And it's, what was really neat is during the summertime, people brought their kids in, and they got to speak with the officers. In the school, we do donuts with a cop. If the kids are doing really good, everybody's got the stigma that cops like donuts. I've eaten a few over the years, but those are when I go fishing usually, not when I'm working. That's the only time I eat them. But we've also recently, we just did the Halloween on Main, which was a great community event. We paired up with Theta Care and our fire department, and we gave out child safety kits. We did DNA samples for the kids. We did fingerprints. Those are all ideas that the officers have come up with. We just had out at Harvest Fest out in King. They went out there and we had one of the officers make some really good chili and some baked stuff. If any of you know Jerry Allen, wonderful bakery stuff. And they sold all that stuff. And the purpose behind that was they wanted to start a scholarship for somebody to get into law enforcement or the fire services or EMS. This was all money that was collected by the officers that they want to turn around, and they want to put that back into our community. They want to have somebody go to school and maybe get a little break and really encourage somebody that, law enforcement or fire services or EMS, we're short of those people. Other things that we've done is cookouts at baseball games, and we've used that money to buy certain things. We're able to purchase, and we're transitioning right now to 9mm handguns. All that was done with money that has been raised that the officers did. We have officers that are coaches that go and they coach baseball, soccer, what other? Hockey. All right, I'm looking at my wife because I've done most of the sports. Baseball. And then being part of those boards and getting involved with the youth. We have many officers that do that. I'm involved with the drug court. I know Andy had talked about the program that they had earlier since the inception of that and how important that is for our community. It's just wonderful to see lives that were so disrupted and people that came into our program that I thought, they are never going to make it. I've dealt with them for 15 years. There is no way. Not all of them do make it, but there is a majority of individuals that are involved in that program that have changed their lives. They're involved in the community. They have families now. They have working, they're working. They're back to normal activity. And what I found out is the individuals never were brought up. They didn't know how to get up in the morning. They didn't know they had to go to school. They didn't know the everyday things that most of us have taught our children as to how we were brought up. They never got any of those life skills. So we're teaching those life skills to them in their 20s and 30s. And it takes a lot. And they do make mistakes. But it's how they handle that mistake and how they move forward as to what we're teaching them. And then the last one that we work with is Wishope down the street. And we're working with the professionals with Theta Care, CAP Services, Department of Health and Human Services. We're doing warm handoffs to these organizations and trying to get the people for the help that they need. And that's just what we've been able to do in Waupaca, for being a small community like we are, because we didn't have the big different organizations or subgroups that you have to go out and do that.
That's all we have, and we definitely have some time for questions as well, if anybody has any. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Gotta use the microphone.
I lived in Madison, and one of the things was the Halloween down in Madison at the university, and we went down there to observe it one time. And my question to you is that your responsibility as the Madison Police Department, or does the Madison University of Wisconsin at Madison have their own police?
First of all, I'm glad that you survived. It's a joint effort. UW does have their own police department, and during Halloween, when it was a sanctioned event, they helped us out a lot. I've worked a few of them more when I was younger, but it's less. It takes less staffing than what it used to. But yeah, it's all hands on deck. I mean, we've got officers from surrounding jurisdictions that all help out with that.
The university doesn't have a full force.
Well, it's full for their size. Yeah, they've got their own department with their own chief and everything. Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned about the in the recruitment part of your talk about the people that you're looking for. Are there any minimum standards of the person that, like education, physical capabilities, psychological? Do you need psychological screening or anything like that for a person that, you said if we know of anybody that might be interested, what are we looking for?
Yeah. So I'll take the last thing you said, the psychological part. That is taken care of in the hiring process. It's usually one of the last things that applicants have to go through before they will be offered a job with MPD. And so that's already built in. When I put in in the academy, I went through the entire process. There were 2 interviews, there was a ride along, and then the last thing before was I had to sit in front of a psychiatrist for an hour and a half and get grilled with all sorts of questions, right? So the psychiatric aspect is there, and a lot of it, they're just looking for how you were raised, family background. What are your what calls can you foresee yourself not wanting to go on, and things like that. So they're just looking for the obvious red flags as far as that's concerned. Education wise, there's not necessarily a minimum. Madison will typically hire folks that have at least an associate's degree. There are exceptions to that, but once you get hired, they offer educational incentives. Where I had a bachelor degree before I joined. After 3 or 4 years of continuous service, my pay increased significantly because of my bachelor degree. Somebody who had a master's degree, their pay increased even more. So there's educational incentive. They will also offer to pay for certain degrees as well. And so schooling wise, maybe not necessarily having to meet a certain criteria. Physical aspects of it, there is a sort of a base level physical criteria that you have to meet. When I went through it, you had to, I think it was a 1.5 mile run in like under 15 minutes. When you're younger, that's not that tall of a task. It is for me now. 30 sit-ups and like 30 push-ups, something like that. So it's nothing too crazy. And then, at least as far as Madison is concerned, we don't require that test to be upheld year after year after year after year that you're on. Some departments do that. Madison does not. So I would say I don't want to say a low bar or a low threshold, but if you're an upstanding citizen, an honest, upstanding citizen who's in reasonably good health and decent education, you should be good.
You have to actually have a minimum of 60 college credits, is what you have to have.
Is that statewide?
Yeah, it's statewide.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
You have to have that within 1 or 2 years of your data hire. You have to have 60 college credits. And then the psych exam is something that's mandated now. That we have to do that. When I first got in law enforcement, we did not have to do that. And that changed for the city of Opaka. That changed in the 90s where they started using Dr. Fecal. But in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I think there was a change in law that it's mandated now that you have to have a psych exam.
Yeah, Chief, I attended one of your coffees with the cop, and I'd like to encourage you to maybe do those 4 times a year. I think they're very valuable to the citizens that just want to go in and chat, and I think the officers learn a little bit about us and things too. So I would, if you could work that in, I think I'd encourage you doing that. A second thing is, as I mentioned, I've moved here about 3 or 4 years ago. We were in the Denver area prior to this. We had what I thought was an extraordinary school resource officer at my daughter's 7 through 12 grade school. And I was on the board there, and I was kind of liaison with him. And we got talking, and he brought up the idea one day, what if I do something on sexual predation for parents? And he brought in some resources he had from, it was either a specialist from the DA's office or from the county, and came in and just invited us in and started a presentation like this. But before he started it, he got his computer going and said, let me show you something. My persona, I'm a 15-year-old girl at this high school, and I got my whatever. So let me get on as my persona. Let me sign it and see what happens. Within 15 minutes, she was getting hits, from around the community. And you should have seen the jaws of the parents and things that go on. So I don't know if that happens. Well, I'm sure the sexual predation, I'm not sure that's the right term, but I'm sure that phishing or whatever occurs here too. But is there a way to, probably working through the schools, to get something like that to make the parents all that more aware of what's going on?
Yeah, we're lucky. We actually have two school liaison officers. We didn't actually, when Andy talked about they lost, our school actually gave us an extra one. We used to have 2 years ago, and they took one away because of the cost, and now we have 2 that are back, and they're working programs like that. I was fortunate enough, I went to the Internet Crimes Against Children. That was, I think, in either North or South Carolina, wherever Greenville is. Excuse me with my...
There's one in each state.
Is there? It was a long time ago. It was back in the early 2000s. But that was one of the things that they taught us. And I will tell you, I'm not the most computer savvy person. I got to usually give my phone to my son to figure something out that I did wrong with it or whatever it may be. But it was unbelievable how back 20 years ago, how people were communicating with us back then. And that hasn't changed. So we still have in this area, we do have an ICAC unit that does work together with the Sheriff's Department. I think one up in Clintonville. I know you guys have an active unit. But yeah, I mean, the education is what we're really finding is the more education that we can give to the students, to the families, the better off that we are. The unfortunate part of it is when we do community events like this, we don't have a large participation. This participation, the group that we have here tonight, is unreal in regards to what we see when we go out and we do community events. We may only get 10 or 15 people that show up. Now, does that mean it's not worth it? Absolutely not. If we can make one impact on one person in that room, it's absolutely worth
I
it.
think if, like the coffee with a cop, if it was got out routinely, it was going to be every 3rd month on the 15th of the month, whatever. I think people could adjust their schedules a little better to that, if that's a value. I know it's a value.
Well, absolutely. And the officers are the ones that put that together, so I will bring that feedback to them, and we'll get on with them a little bit, right, Garrett? You're welcome.
This poor Garrett back here.
Is it on?
I would like to know what sort of preparation you and the Sheriff's Department have made for the election tomorrow.
Good question. So when you go back to the systems that we use that we had on the board earlier, we get intelligence reports from them in regards to if there's a suspicious package that arrives. How are you going to handle it? We've worked with the statewide hazmat unit in regards to what is going to happen if something bad happens at our elections tomorrow. So we've communicated this with our Wapak County Hazmat. We've talked with the Sheriff's Department in regards to what we're going to do here locally. And today I met with Barb, who works upstairs, who's in charge of our elections. We're going to have officers at the elections tomorrow. They're going to stop in periodically if there are any problems as to whatever that there may be. If we need backup, we need help, we'll call the Sheriff's Department. They will come assist us. If something suspicious happens, we have protocols that are set up that we're going to follow. And at the end of the evening, and we've done this for years, at 8 o'clock, we have an officer that comes in before 8 o'clock to make sure they watch their clock. When 8 o'clock is, anybody gets in line after 8 o'clock, they're not allowed to vote. So they go through. So, and these are things that we've done over the years that we've had officers walk through. Back in probably the early 2000s, at some point there was a scare of anthrax that was going through. And I know Kevin worked at Health and Human Services probably back then when the courthouse got locked down and there was a suspicious piece of mail where something they thought fell out. And I had to get a hazmat suit on. We had to go on there. We had to investigate it. The best part about it is we found out that it was drywall dust that they hadn't used in the mailroom. But we took all the precautions that we needed to make sure that everything was okay. And it just worked out that way. So we do have stuff that is set up if we have any interference or whatever tomorrow.
So locally in the county, there was a flap a few years back about some officers' reports being altered. And I'm wondering, with this AI-generated reports, are you going to be open to challenges legally for things that aren't in the officer's own words?
Well, actually, it's a good question. So I actually spoke with our district attorney last week in regards to this, if she had any concerns of us doing this. And at this point, she does not. And what the AI does is the officer actually has to go through his report. He has to go through He's got to go through the report. He has to review it to make sure it's accurate. And then, like, when we sign a criminal complaint, we have to swear to it that everything is correct and true to the best of our knowledge and belief. They have to sign off on that. And at the bottom of the report, it'll say this report was generated by AI. So they're swearing that that is accurate. The good thing about that is nobody can go in and alter that report. Once that report, the only person that can is the officer whose body camera that it is. Nobody from administration or anybody can go in and change any words or anything with that. So that's, and like I said, we're going to probably be getting it in the next 3 weeks. So these are some of the things that we're going to look at. But it's unbelievable where AI is and where it's going.
We have time for one more question here.
Hi there. I want to talk to you about Silver Alert. Has anything ever happened here in Wapaka? Or I work at Quick Trip on QQ, and late at night, or any time of the day, we get this on the lottery, Silver Alert, quite a bit. I mean, it's happening a lot lately. And they kind of tell us maybe if I come back the next day, I get kind of worried. Did they find a person? Because we're on the lookout. It says for us on the lottery computer, they got a picture of the person, and then they want us to make note, look for the car. They tell us what exactly car they took off on or where they're at, what clothes they're wearing. There's getting to be a lot of old age homes. Is dementia, it's got to be 90% of the time they don't know how to go home. Have you noticed any of this increase lately with Silver Alert?
Can you
Well-
explain what a Silver Alert is?
Well, a Silver Alert is for somebody that, do you know what age it is, Andy?
50, I thought.
Is it 50? Wow, I could have a silver alert with me. But no, what a silver alert is if somebody is missing, they haven't come home, they believe that they're endangered, a family member or friend can call us, and we put that on the YCAN alert, and then it goes out to businesses, whoever that has gotten on that list or subscribed to it. And what we found out over the years is we always used to protect everything, that we didn't want to tell anybody anything. Over the years, they found out that, hey, we need to get that information out because there's more of the people that are out in the community than what there is law enforcement officers. And usually the best thing that happens, and I don't know if this is just up here, and I don't know if it's in Madison, as soon as somebody puts out a silver alert, I probably get sometimes 2, 3, 4 a day. And usually when they go out, within an hour, I get an alert that's been canceled, that the person's been found. So that's the good thing, is we're not waiting, we're getting it out there right away. And we're getting, the people are getting home. And then what we do is we follow up, if it's in our community, we follow up with the families to make sure, should this person be driving? Is it do you need to take their driver's license away? Or, should they go with a friend and everything else? I mean, do you have anything different, Andy?
I would agree anecdotally. Anecdotally, I have noticed a few more silver alerts than normal. Yeah, and I mean, usually when a silver alert gets put out there, you look at the news, you look at any kind of local news source, and it's going to be on there as well. And so if you're wondering, did they find the person, usually best bet is just to look at local news and see if they found them. But yeah, I'm not sure why a lot of them all of a sudden. I don't know, but I have noticed that.
It's because we're all getting older.
Yeah, perhaps.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.